Dr. Michael Okpara, who lived between 1920 to 1984, was a Nigerian politician and medical doctor who served as the premier of Eastern Nigeria between 1959 and 1966, with legacies like economic development through industrialization and agricultural growth, social development through free education and healthcare initiatives. His visionary leadership and promotion of democratic principles, transformative impact on Eastern Nigeria that inspired future generations. And the question is there another Michael Ihono Okpara on the horizon? Or are we going to wait for another long time? This is the Eastern Eye. I am Alex Obodo. Adama Okpara joins me now from California, United States. Thank you for joining me, Adama Okpara, the very first granddaughter of Dr. Michael Ehon Okpara, of course, former Premier of the Eastern region. Thank you for joining me tonight on the Eastern Eye. Hello, I'm not quite sure Adama can hear me, but we'll be finding out from her when she comes on about what her thoughts were about, of course, the earliest experiences she will have had of her grandfather and what it felt like being the very first granddaughter of a man of such big stature. Are you there, Adama?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear now. Thank you for joining me on the Eastern Eye.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, being the first grandchild of MI, I think it was obviously it's a blessing. It's an honor. I am the first grandchild, but I'm also a twin. So there are actually two of us. And the earliest memory I had of him, obviously we were born in the US. And, when he returned from exile, he was in Ireland for a few years. When he returned from exile, he was depressed, and so my parents believed that, it would help his mood for my twin sister and I to be sent back home. So we were sent back home. So the earliest memories I have of him is just, he was a very, very warm person, very, very gregarious, had a lot of friends, always had visitors over. He was very, very close to his brother, who was also a surgeon, a medical doctor, Dr. Paul, Mr. Okpara. And so my earlier days was just being around family, seeing my grandfather just, always surround himself with friends and family. So, that's really like my earliest memory. He was always a working man. He was always busy. I remember that. He was always busy. He was either at his clinic or going to a function or having parties or welcoming, people to our home. And, people drop by unannounced all the time. So, he was just a warm person. And I think that, really fortune did smile on him, at him, everything this guy, he had great friends, a great wife, wonderful family. In fact, I even think sometimes when I think about his children and just, there are three girls, there are three boys. It cannot get any more perfect than that. And so he really truly was a blessed and special person.
I like the way you put that. And you also spoke about your grandmother, who I believe you are named after, because
yes,
she was also Adama Okpara. So
she actually named me.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So talk to us about what it felt like, really, because for a man of such big stature, he will have to have a comfortable home front to make it possible for him to accomplish all he did in Eastern Nigeria when he was at the helm. The home front must have been really, really a calm place for him.
My grandmother was a beautiful woman. She really was her name. And she provided a comfortable home, a solid home, a loving home. And I believe that everything my grandfather accomplished, my grandmother was an integral part of that, a very important part of that success. I actually like to reference, what took place when, my grandfather was in exile, self-imposed exile in Ireland. My family, we did struggle, because, as you know, before, when the war took place, they took everybody's money, especially those in the southeast. They cleared our bank accounts. Funds were frozen, and so it was really, really hard for us to get certain things done. But one thing I realized, especially when it has to do with my own father, who was their first child and first son, Nawihe, engineer Nawihe Okpara, when I look at his journey to the United States, it was, my grandfather was in exile. He couldn't really do too much, in terms of the financial part of sending my father to the US. So he basically gave an order or, made his request known to his wife, my grandmother, and said, I want you to prepare Nawihe to go to the US. I believe he's a brilliant mathematician. And I think that, he would do very well. His talents will be celebrated in the US. He can do a whole lot more for humanity there. And things were very hard for my grandmother, but, she was able to gather the funds, to send my father to the US. And I think that my grandparents made a great team. They were a dynamic team. And again, it brings back to what I mentioned earlier. I believe that my grandfather was a very, very fortunate man, because I believe that somehow life gave him the perfect partner, someone that was supportive. And, the funny thing is, my grandmother never remarried, after my grandfather passed away in 1984. And she always wore her wedding band, and I remember during her last years, I would often talk with her on the phone, and she would always say, "You mean my husband? Are you talking about my husband?" So there's that love that never went away, so everything that we are is because of, two people that somehow God just showed extraordinary favor, and we're recipients of that. So it's a blessing, and there will not be an MI without a Dhamma. There will not. In fact, when you read about his story and his life, he mentions, when he finally realized that, oh my God, this is the woman for me. This is the woman I'm supposed to spend the rest of my life with. And I think that empowered him, and it gave him confidence to, do what he did, on the political stage in Nigeria. I think that without the support of my grandmother, maybe he would not have done that. He just really wanted to be a medical doctor, but, she supported him,
I mean, and not a lot of people knew that he was a medical doctor. But then everyone seemed to remember your grandfather as that man that set the Eastern Nigeria landscape to a very fast-paced development trajectory. No one really remembers the fact that he was a medical doctor. I mean, do you think that he had to sacrifice the thing he trained to be in order just to be on that political lane to set the pace for a development that was almost totally truncated from 1966?
Of course there was a sacrifice. I'm sure that many of us have read the story of when Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe asked him to run for office, and I think his Maze Mbonu Ojike had to basically interject and say, the boss says you're going to contest, so you're going to contest. And that is how my grandfather got into politics, and he was pretty good at it. But he really just wanted to just have a simple life with his wife, as a medical doctor. So yes, I think he sacrificed a lot of his desires to lead, the Eastern Nigeria. I think he sacrificed that, desire. But, the good thing about it is, again, it draws back to what I said, that I believe that my grandfather was a very, very fortunate man, because even after all he did, on the political landscape, when the war happened, the coup happened, and, he went into self-imposed exile, he returned to Ireland to study medicine or to further his medical career. And it was a humbling experience, because at that time, I think he was about 50 something years old, and many of the classmates in Ireland in this medical school were the same age as his children. you know, and he was a former premier. He was actually looking for roommates, so that he's not on the street, if that. So, I think he was a very humble man. And I think that because of that humility, God blessed him. God truly blessed him. But yeah, I believe that he sacrificed, a big portion of his desire to just be a medical doctor, just to be a politician, But I don't think he did not regret it. He did not regret it at all. He was very, very proud of everything that he was able to accomplish. And we're very proud of him.
Absolutely. So let's talk about your own father. That is Dr. M.I. Wara's son, Nawihe. And did he share any insights into your grandfather's life? Did he share any relationship they had? The kind of man he was?
Always. My father always loved to reference his dad. They were very, very close. My father respected his father very much. Obviously he would always reference his father, whenever, I guess, if something happens at home, he would say, my dad would not ever, he would always reference, my dad, my grandpa, so they were very close. In terms of, how my father became my father, my father was actually a patented aeronautical engineer. And, he continued to actually receive these patents long after he passed away. He passed away about 3 years ago. And so he's still receiving patents, and so that's a huge accomplishment. But when you look at my family, a lot of us, to accomplish what we accomplish, we do always reference everything that our patriarch was able to accomplish. And that motivates us to just keep going and keep going. I mean, this is a man that, went from the leader of Eastern Nigeria to someone that was in exile, trying to find a flatmate so that, he can have a place to put it, place his head, and he did all of that, was able to return back to Nigeria, was able to still, carry out his dream of just being a medical doctor, and I mean, everything that we are is because of, Dr. M.I. Okpara and Mrs. Adam Okpara. We believe that they were just a solid reference in terms of, if you put your mind to something, you can definitely get it done, and you can do it with grace, without being corrupt, and I'm just so proud to be from that stock.
Yes, I'm not, you just hit the nail on the head, without being corrupt. And the fact that your grandfather struggled to get roommates in Ireland suggested that he didn't have the resources to do so. But we are talking about someone who was premier of Eastern Nigeria. I mean, in the whole setup, people would expect that he would have amassed enough wealth to give him that leverage to live any kind of life he wanted. But lo and behold, it is said that he didn't even have a house at his hometown at that time. So this must be quite humbling for your family, having to tell the stories. But there's a flip side to it, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, do you consider that his legacies, do you consider it a burden or a blessing?
That's a very, very interesting question. I would lean more to calling it what it is, which is, it is a blessing, However, as you know, when you come from a family that is well known, well respected, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure. There are things that I can't do, there's just, what I mean? So I would call it a blessing. I think it's a blessing. The pressure, we meet it head on. That's something about my family. Like, whatever you put before us, we are going to meet it head on, and, and just get through it. So I consider it a blessing because, there were a lot of people during my grandfather's time that maybe some may say, these individuals were not exactly upright. My grandfather did not participate in nepotism. He gave everybody an equal chance, no matter what tribe you come from. He respected everybody. He believed that if you give a man the dignity and the respect that is due to him, that man or that person will work his heart out for you. They will give you the very, very best. He was just a really good person, and it's so funny because, we're in the month of December and my grandfather's birthday was December 25th. Again, it brings it all back to this man was just simply a special human being. And if we look at life and we look at history and we look at just certain signs and stuff, he also passed away very, very young. And he didn't just pass away very, very young. He accomplished so much at an early age, almost as though he was like in a hurry, in a hurry to get something done. So to me, it tells me that truly, when God has blessed someone, it is, it's done. Nobody can take away that blessing from him. I'm just, again, I keep bringing it back, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but my grandfather, we're very, very proud of him, extremely proud of him. I know he did not have the resources when he was in Ireland, but he made it through. He was able to be admitted into the I forget what it's an elite medical group, and he was able to be admitted into that group. I forget what it's called, but so that's the Okpara way. No matter if we fall, no matter how hard we fall, trust that we're going to get back up, and we're going to get all the way back up, without losing, our morals.
All right. So, I will have to ask you this question either ways. Has any member of your family ventured into politics, either at home or abroad?
Actually, there are two. My mom is actually, my mom is married to my dad, but she's a member of the board out here, for her school district. So, that's like, politics. But my uncle, Chief Uzodin Mountbara, was the former PDP chieftain a few years ago. So, and he also ran for the office of governorship for Abia State. I believe that was in about 2006 or so, 2006, 2005. And so, yes, there we have, there are members of my family that, have ventured into politics post our patriarch, Dr. M.I. Okpara.
So now, typically, now that you've mentioned that, do you maybe among your siblings, directly speaking, because you've referenced your family members outside of his downline, his biological downline. So within your family, have you ventured, tried to run for any office, maybe in the US?
Well, Chief Uzodin Mokbara is actually the third child of Dr. M. Okpara and Adam Okpara. So, that was direct line.
I thought
have I? No, I have not. Okay. I have not. Other than that, we actually just like kind of steer clear of politics. We just like focus on our private life, and that's pretty much it. That we're lawyers, we're doctors, we live a very, very simple life, almost like, a life that I think that my grandfather would actually wanted before he joined politics, which is just, you go to school, you have your career, you have your quiet life. A lot of us have that, we just worked like everybody else, and we just live very, very normal lives that are not really in the limelight.
Okay, now let's talk about your father's legacies. With the knowledge of his accomplishments, everything he managed to put on the ground between 1959 and 1966. He didn't just do it because currently people just look at the 5 states of the Southeast. He was in charge of the Southeast and the South-South put together. He had development plans scattered all over the place and had a proper plan on how every sector should work. So how much of a challenge is this? Are you worried that about the derailment of everything he set in motion when the war started and ended?
Well, the war I mean, the war, nobody wanted the war to happen, as most of us know. There were many, you know, actions that were put in place, or there were many attempts to divert the war. And unfortunately the war still happened. And yeah, it derailed a lot of the projects that he worked so hard to build. And I have to mention the great men and women that worked in his cabinet, because, for my grandfather to accomplish what he did, it is because he was surrounded by brilliant and accomplished people as well. Men like, Dr. Akanibiam, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. There's just so many of them, I mean, I think, God, what's this guy's name? Minister Tafawe Balewa. Forgive me. I think it's Tafewa Balewa. I mean, my grandfather just tried to like work with everybody. He just tried to, just do the best that he can with what he had. In terms of derailment, I think that, I mean, of course, a lot of his projects were derailed, and it's unfortunate, because when you look at Nigeria today, that, history is not part of the Nigerian curriculum. And so that's already a bad thing, because unfortunately, we're not empowering the youth with the truth about their history. If we're not allowed or given the option to know where we have been, how can we know where we're headed? How can we avoid the pitfalls that happened, with the people before us, So I think that as long as there's, lack of history, in Nigerian schools, a lot more stuff will be derailed. And I don't think it is fair to, I mean, obviously, as you know, Nigerians, we're very, very accomplished. And I think that it's just kind of sad, that, those of us that are still living in Nigeria are just not given enough respect, in terms of, just having access to quality education.
Mm.
So
I mean, we'll have about 6 minutes to go, and I have probably two more questions for you.
sure.
And the first one would be, did your grandfather share any regrets about what happened during the war and how it derailed some of the plans he and his team put together in eastern Nigeria, turning it into the fastest growing economy in the world at that time? It must have been a real pain.
Well, that's why he was depressed. That's why he was depressed. I believe he came back to Nigeria in 1979 or so, but that's why he was depressed, because, he worked so hard, only to, come back home and, start again from scratch, So in terms of, did he actually like sit me down and say, Adama, that I was too young. I was far too young. But but the effect of the war and everything that he went through. I don't know if you know this, but when he came back to Nigeria from self-imposed exile, the Nigerian government actually arrested him. So he was arrested for a short period of time, but he was arrested. And that's a lot for a person to take. That's a whole lot. You start out, young, hopeful medical doctor. You end up in politics. You have this fastest growing economy that even rivaled Malaysia, China, etc. You did all of that. And then you find yourself in exile in Ireland. You have no money. And then you finally make it back home. And then you get arrested. And oh my God, every time I think about my grandfather, I truly believe that the war actually killed him. Because, as you know, or maybe you guys don't know, but he passed away from a heart attack, And so being away from your family for so many years and then coming back and then being treated that way and just like having to pick back up at 60, I think he was about 60 something years old. He didn't live he didn't live that much longer. He passed away when he was 64 years old. And, for the longest time, my father actually thought that he was going to pass away at 64. Thank God he didn't, But so in terms of, did he express these things verbally to me? No. In his behavior, you can tell. You can tell. And I think that it ended up, he died of a broken heart of what, came of, the region that he governed.
So looking at Nigeria today, do you think another MI or MI power, let me use that word now, I haven't used it since we started conversing. Do you think we can get another MI power, especially within the southeastern enclave?
It's possible. It definitely is possible. I think is absolutely possible. And, we're all just waiting to embrace that new MI. And, it's possible. But again, if we do not teach history, and if certain demographics are just consciously omitted, from being part of the leadership, leadership in our country, then it makes it a little bit harder. It makes it a little bit harder to have another MI. But we do believe that I pray that we do have another MI. That's all I can do, pray about it.
So Nigeria is going through what it's going through. Sometimes I read your posts on social media, but you don't seem to say a lot about the politics of the country. Is that something deliberate? You sometimes write in codes.
You're not the only one that tells me that. I think I always write in code. But yes, it's definitely deliberate. And I cannot discuss every single reason, but the coup and what happened during the coup, and people's understanding of what happened in the coup, who is responsible for this, who is, what I mean? I'm just too close. I'm too close to, I guess, the political demographic to be as vocal as I would like to be. I'm too close.
You know what? Adama Okpara, it's been very, very enlightening speaking to you tonight on the Eastern Eye. Maybe we should do this another time later in the future. And I have to thank you. We've been planning this. It was rescheduled at one time, but finally it happened. And I have to thank you so much for getting the opportunity to talk about your grandfather. It was quite an emotional conversation, but you overcame that storm. Really good. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
All right. And that's the Eastern Eye tonight. And up next is Nka with Jumai Bulama Ashebu. My name is Alex Obodo. Good night.